Hello and welcome to this Fox Nation special, Trump on Trial, the Sentencing Live show. I'm Greg Jarrett. Thanks for being here. Well, earlier today, Judge Juan Merchan handed President-elect Donald Trump an unconditional discharge on 34 felony counts in the historic New York so-called hush money case. Although Trump does face no jail time whatsoever, no penalties, no fines, he will now be branded formally as a convicted felon when he enters the White House on January 20th. To react is my expert panel, Ron Chapman, a federal defense attorney. So, Ron, I must say I am still confounded by this. You know, I negotiated a lot of non-disclosure agreements, perfectly legal. Part of the conditions are, we keep it secret. And that's for very good reasons. Oftentimes, the payment is made to avoid litigation costs. So it's naturally accounted for as a legal expense. You know, as I continue to look at this case and examine their legal theory, isn't it non-existent?
Well, yeah. But I think that this problem starts even earlier than that. The issue that I have, and the issue that should be near and dear to the hearts of every American, is that the Constitution allows us to get notice of what are considered crimes in this country. And the problem that we have here is that this crime is so vague that it could be levied against anybody who miscategorizes, according to Alvin Bragg's view, a legal expense. That should be concerning to Donald Trump, but it should also be concerning to everybody in New York. And of course, I spend a bunch of time in federal courtrooms dealing with defendants who are facing these sorts of vague criminal prosecutions as well. And I hope Trump's Department of Justice starts looking at the application of a lot of these statutes. I know Justice Gorsuch already is, and saying, listen, it's about time that we make the code clear and allow people to understand exactly what is a crime. And these sort of paper process, bureaucratic lawfare crimes can just go out the window. These statutes need to be overturned and reversed by the courts. And I think it's going to start with this case and Donald Trump's case, which will relieve him of the consequences of a conviction.
Ronald, what he's essentially saying is we spent millions of dollars prosecuting Donald Trump, knowing well in advance that upon conviction, the law doesn't support incarceration or a financial penalty or even probation, but instead it supports an unconditional discharge. But we don't care. It's Donald Trump. We're trying to prevent him from getting elected president. So even though there's no punishment whatsoever under New York law, we're going to spend millions of dollars going after him. Do I summarize that correctly?
I think you got it exactly right. And first, don't even get me started on the backlog of cases in Manhattan there and the real victims who were waiting for justice for a long time while Donald Trump was paraded into the courtroom over and over again for this dog and pony show trial that ended up getting Manhattan absolutely nothing. I mean, their school system is losing money. They're over budget. Meanwhile, they're getting millions in federal funding just to survive in Manhattan, but yet they decide to spend their time on a case like this. We could go on all day long about that, but let's talk about the unconditional discharge here. What does this mean? Well, a conviction alone is a pretty big consequence for a lot of people, and so that's an authorized punishment. You just get the conviction. We don't need to put any other restraint on your freedom. That's reasonable. But why was Judge Merchan put in this trap? Well, it's because of the Supremacy Clause, and it's because Donald Trump was essentially elected. Had he discussed any potential sentence or even considered any potential sentence that would have put state restraints on Donald Trump, a probation officer, or an ankle monitor, or even prison time, likely the Supreme Court wouldn't have gone the way that they did. And in fact, they specifically said the reason why they're not taking this case up right now is because there doesn't appear to be any conditions imposed on Donald Trump that would prevent him from taking office, and the Supremacy Clause is not implicated here. As a result of that, Donald Trump essentially gets no punishment. But would there have really been any punishment anyway? Was this a good use of Manhattan resources, of New York City resources? I hope the voters take to the polls and really decide that so that they can maybe take their city back and not have this gross expenditure of resources. I'm
of the opinion, Ronald, that this conviction will not last. What do you think?
Well, as you were talking, my thought was going back to Ronald Reagan. I think he once said that the problem with my liberal friends is that they believe so many things that just aren't so. And that's the problem that we have with Alvin Bragg, and that's the problem that we have with Judge Merchan here. Let's imagine that we were in a courtroom and 10, 20, 30 million people came forward to give a character statement about the character of the individual who was being prosecuted. I think that that would be pretty good evidence in terms of mitigation, but also pretty good evidence that a prosecution like this shouldn't continue. And that's exactly what we have in our country. We have a vote. And a vote with full knowledge of all the salacious conduct that they could possibly throw at Donald Trump. And as a result of that vote, we have a referendum clearly telling this prosecutor's office and this judge that Donald Trump does not deserve to be labeled a felon. And instead, we have an oppressive judge from an oppressive district that decides to overweight their power above that of the people of the United States who voted lawfully and say, well, this doesn't take away your conviction and it's not in mitigation, but I have respect for the office. Well, that's just simply wrong. The public has spoken. Donald Trump is the president, does not deserve to be saddled with a felony conviction. This is going to rocket through the appellate courts. And just like we've already seen, this court does not have a great track record when it comes to New York appeals that were based on these sort of lawfare prosecutions. Now, this case will get kicked aside pretty quickly. The only question is, what grounds will they do it? There's such a plethora of them. It's a target-rich environment, as some friends might say.
All right, Ron, let me get the last question to you, sort of a bigger picture of all of this. Yes, Trump lost the trial, but he won the larger lawfare war because in the end, Americans are smart people, and they saw this for what it was, a corruption and weaponization of the legal system for purely political reasons. So who is the loser? I think the New York legal system is the big loser. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think the legal system is the big loser because of all of the, like I said, the backlogged cases, the inability to get to the real victims. I would say that Alvin Bragg definitely is going to be the loser. Fani Willis, we'll see what goes on with some of the investigations related to her. I think they're definitely going to come out the loser. But I will tell you that there's a shining bright light, and Trump was somewhat genius in his approach here, a shining bright light for the American people, that lawfare was tested, that lawfare was able to be seen through. People have stood by their guiding document, the Constitution, and recognize that something like this doesn't seem right, and they rejected it, and they took to the polls, and they did so. That's the most democratic thing I've ever heard of. It makes me very proud of my country. It makes me very proud of the incoming president here for withstanding that and engaging in this fight when he could have backed down. And I think that he and the American people ultimately will be the true winners out of this scenario.
Ronald, many thanks to all three of you for joining us today.